Would you tell me your name, please?
Megan Danielle Henley.
Megan. You give me permission to publish this interview on social media?
I do give you permission.
Megan, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town called Boonville, Mississippi.
You have a happy childhood?
Mm, I don't know if the word's happy, hard.
What do you mean by hard?
Hard. I mean, I can remember starting at age 3. I do recall. Most of my childhood memories, thinking back, weren't always good ones. Not very many good ones. I've had somebody ask me a question before. I think it was your video, as a matter of fact, I was watching on a lady. What was your fondest or your most happy childhood memory? And, I thought about that question, and I had a hard time coming to a conclusion of one. Life was hard for me. My mother was an addict. And I just remember a lot of things. And as I get older and through my addiction, I've noticed I have flashbacks of being that child that I see another child crying at the bedroom door when I was in active addiction, a child crying at that bedroom door of the house I was at because his mother was on the other side. And I have a flashback to that child being me, crying at the bathroom door. So it was pretty hard. I mean, and my mother didn't get addicted till she was in her late 30s. But I just remember it being hard. I remember crying myself to sleep every night when I was probably 6 years old for my dad.
Did your mama deal with addiction?
My mother did deal with addiction. My whole family did, as a matter of fact. I remember my grandfather drank himself to death. My aunt drank herself to death at age 35. My mother was an addict, but she didn't start doing drugs until she was in her late 30s, 35 maybe. So it runs in my family. So I've been around it my whole life. I am never married, never been married, as a matter of fact. I have 4 kids, 3 boys, ages 15, ages 14, and ages 11 that do not reside in my home. And I have a little girl that is 3 by a different man that resides in my home. The other 3 are by the same man, and my little girl's by a different man. When did my addiction start? It's hard for me to say. It's been that long, and I hate to admit that, but it's the truth. I want to say maybe 12, and that's scary to me, knowing I have a 12-year-old. I think the first thing I ever did, maybe 12 or 13. I grew up very fast. I want to say it would be alcohol, and I want to believe it was alcohol. A birthday party. Sweet 16 of my cousins. We had my grandmother's big house and her pool room all to ourselves, and I remember getting very intoxicated on orange juice and vodka. And I remember taking my first pill that day, which would have been a Xanax. And I don't remember much after that night. I remember they locked me in the back bedroom and wouldn't let me out because I was trying to call everybody and their mama on the phone that wasn't plugged in the wall. And I think I was 12 or 13. I actually lost my virginity that night. I was 13, as a matter of fact. That was the first time that I'd ever drank alcohol. And I think after that, as I got older, I was in school, and I always hated school. I would sneak in the front door and out the back. At that age, I was smoking cigarettes, and I was hanging out with people that were way older than me that were also drinking. I started smoking marijuana. I remember the first time I smoked, there was an R&R Sportsplex. I'll never forget it, across from the apartments. My mom owned duplexes, as a matter of fact. Across the road was a arcade that all the kids hung out at. I smoked a joint in the parking lot of that, and I don't remember getting high off of that joint. But after that, it led to the marijuana, and I started smoking marijuana and drinking very heavily on the weekends. 13, 14, my senior friends would sign me out of school. I didn't have any discipline or I didn't really have much parenting. I parented my mom. My mom didn't parent me. I'm trying to think back to when I did have a parent and before the drugs. I remember being normal, a normal life. I remember when I missed a problem on my homework. I remember having to write my problem over and over. I remember my mother being normal one time throughout my life. And that would be when she met a man that straightened her up and She did right. She cooked supper every night. She cooked breakfast every morning. We had bedtimes. And I remember that's the only normalcy I ever really knew. So back to the drugs, I was sober through that with that man and everything. I think I was in the fourth grade. I got held back in the fourth grade. I went to the fifth grade. Back in Boonville, my mom and him had broke up, and we had moved from a little small town called Wheeler, 10 minutes from Boonville, back to Boonville. And when my mom moved into those apartments that she inherited when my papa died, is when everything went downhill from there. I was smoking weed. I was drinking alcohol. And watched my mama fall back into her addiction with alcohol. And I started to raise my little brother. We were 3 years apart. And then I will never forget it. It was actually a narcotics officer in the Boonville town that I live in. His son, I smoked meth for the first time at his apartment. He's sober now.
How old were you?
I was 14 or 15 years old. 14 or 15 years old.
The first time you smoked meth?
Yes, sir. It was called red phosphorus, I think is what they called it. I just knew it made me feel really bad, and I didn't like it very much. And I never did it again after that for a long, long time. But I remember when I did, and throughout that, when I did it that one time, I didn't like the way it made me feel. I stayed up all night, and I was so young. I didn't like the way it made me feel. I remember after that, of course, my stepmom and my dad were also addicts. My dad was a good man, though. He carried a good job. And my stepmom was a stay-at-home wife, but they did work part-time at a restaurant. My dad did construction. My stepmom and him would help out at this restaurant down the road, but they were both addicts, but they were functioning addicts. With that being said, I remember my stepmom got bunches and bunches of pills. And I remember being 15, I believe. That's when my senior friends were signing me out of school. My mom made me live with my dad for a little while to straighten me up. Keep in mind, I'd never got to be a child before. 14, 15, I had a curfew. I could only go out 2 times a week. And keep in mind, he made me work. I was working at that restaurant that they worked at. But little to his knowledge, my stepmom was feeding me pills. She shared her Xanax. She got 200 Xanax, 200 Lortab, 200 methadone, a 200 Percocet. I'm not exaggerating. And my dad got the same, except for he got Oxycontin. I never seen my dad do drugs, but I knew that he did in a different room, So, yeah, my stepmom introduced me to pills on that vacation we went to in Florida. On that vacation, she was like, "You want one of these?" I was like, "Sure." So that started a whole nother addiction that I wasn't aware that I had. And on that vacation, that's when I really started taking pills. Methadone is also what she got. So methadone and whatever she handed me is what I took, actually. Drinking drinks on the beach, alcoholic beverages. I remember coming home, and I remember it was a bad time in my life, because my little brother actually had gotten out of the home that me and my mom shared, which were, and keep in mind, the duplexes that we owned, or that she owned, that, sometimes didn't have power and water. My mom was so deep in her addiction that, she would collect rent and drugs and, promise these people their power and water wouldn't get cut off, and then it would, so along with ours would. So that's when it all kind of just started crumbling downhill there. And when I didn't do meth again, though. I didn't do meth again until, Lord, I could just go on and on. I left out cocaine. So I was in school, okay. After the Florida vacation and the pills and all that, I started doing cocaine. At this point, my mom was still with the good man, where I was having the good life. So this threw me all out of whack, okay? So she went to the 5th floor, and I lived with my grandma, and then I started getting wild again. Met a friend, and I started doing cocaine. During that addiction, I was raped. Didn't know till I got older that that's what happened to me. It took me growing up a lot. And I think I was all 15 when this happened, as a matter of fact.
How did you know that you'd been raped?
I thought it was my fault. I ran into that guy again, and you won't believe who he was with.
Who's that?
My stepmother.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mhm. All that, and keep in mind, I'm just trying to keep my head above water at this point. I'm trying to help my mom. I was standing there and make sure she didn't burn the house down. She was on going to the methadone clinic. I was 15. You know, I was doing what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. All my friends were seniors, and my nickname was Jailbait. If that told you anything. I looked way older than my age, and I was way more mature than my age. I did work briefly, and I'll tell you when I started doing meth again, and when everything just went downhill from there. So I got enough of my dad, and I moved back home with my mom because I didn't like the structure, the discipline that he gave me. It was hard for me to try to be a child when I never had gotten a chance to. You know, how do you make a child be a child when all they've ever known is being an adult? And that was really hard for me to go back to. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
So, you know, and my father didn't understand that. And you know, I was happy at my father's. I remember when I lived with my mom, I never got up and fixed my hair or anything for school. And I remember when I lived with my dad, I used to get up and I used to fix my hair, and I would do something with myself. And I remember the teachers noticing that. And I was in the 9th grade because I remember my high school teacher telling me something about, well, Meghann, you sure did clean up well. I remember I wore a Lady Blue Devils pullover every day to school and my hair in a bun every day. So when I moved in with my dad, I guess I loved myself a little more because I remember doing my hair and my makeup. But I didn't like, it was hard for me to deal with his rules. I didn't want to be at home all through the week and only go out twice a week. And I mean, if I went to McDonald's and got a Happy Meal, that was my night out, by golly. And I didn't like it. So I went back home to my mother. And then I felt like somebody needed to help my mother. My little brother moved out with the man that we had the stability with. And he raised him. So I felt like my mom needed me. So I moved back home with my mom. And my mom started renting to a big drug dealer. And that right there is when my whole life changed. I was still 15. All this happened 15, 16 years old. As a matter of fact, because the man that we had the normalcy with, his new wife, which was the mayor's daughter, they're still married now, and all his kids are great kids. He's got a vet, he's got a preacher, he's got an electrician, he's got really good kids, a pharmacist. He's got some really good kids. My brother turned out really well, but his wife actually took me to get my driver's license. That's how I remember how old I was, 16. And my mama ran into this drug dealer, and I won't never forget it. I had a car. I was working at a food giant. The girls next door that lived beside me watched me grow up. They worked there forever, so they got me on at the food giant. I had a car. I was renting from a friend. I was doing very well. And all it took was that guy going to jail in front of the duplexes my mama owned one night. My mama stayed in the bed a lot. Okay, so she always was asleep. So during all that, sometime during that process, I did do meth again, and it was with a friend from Red Bay, Alabama. And I would only do it on the weekends, once or twice, or whatever. You know, every weekend I would see him. Every other weekend I would see him. We would do it. I would come home, and I wouldn't do it again. So he had went to rehab and come home, and we had him a coming home party. So keep in mind that drug dealer lived next door. All right. So that drug dealer went to jail, and my friend come home from rehab, and we were having us a little party next door in an empty apartment. It's a duplex. I keep calling it an apartment. And an empty duplex my mom had. We had a coming home party. Me and him, one of his buddies, and I think 2 of my girl cousins. And he was sober from meth. So the guy that was the drug dealer went to jail right in front of the apartments, and or the duplexes. And his girlfriend, I ran over there because she had children. And I ran over there, and I knew what he'd done. I just didn't know the extent of it. And I asked her, I said, do you need me to do anything? Is there anything you need me to put up or anything like that? Do you need me to take your kids? You know, is there anything I can help you with? Because I just knew they were going to come back to search the home. And she handed me 2 things. And this is when my life changed right here. She handed me 2 things. She handed me a weed pipe, and she handed me a meth pipe. And she said, whatever you do not smoke what's in that pipe. Talking about the meth pipe. She said, this is all he has, and he will be very angry. Well, one, she shouldn't have said, do not do it, and I would have never thought about it. I'm just being honest. Because
Right.
you know what I did? Honey, I dipped that party over there at that empty apartment all five of us were at, and I went straight to that back little studio apartment. You know what I did? I smoked everything that was in that little pipe, and that was some really really bad stuff back then. Before the shake and bake, it was really bad stuff. I'm talking about it had people going crazy, and I was a baby, you know. And he come home the next day, and I was like, look, here's this and this, and I'm really sorry, but I smoked what was in that. And he said, do you want more? Of course, I said yes. This man was a lot older than me. I then quit my job at the food giant, hanging out with him, of course, getting high. That's also how I met my little girl's dad. I mean, not my little girl's dad, my boy's dad. My boy's dad would come around, and this guy would take my phone from me, hold me hostage, you know, and not let me go home. And if I would go home, he would make me knock on the wall a couple times. And he was very obsessed with me. I remember sleeping on a blanket on the floor over at his apartment, you know. I was such a baby. You know, I had a lady in prison that had life told me that my mom sold me to him. And if my mom ever hears this, it'll break her heart. But I don't think she was aware of what she was doing because she was in her own addiction and they were feeding her drugs as well. I think that he kept her high so he could keep a hold on me.
Yeah.
And my mama didn't care what I did as long as she was high, I guess, you know, or she had a pain pill or she had cigarettes and a Mountain Dew and was in the bed because my mama was in a very dark place in her life. I just said I wanted my mama to save me and get me from over there. But then again, I was in an active addiction I wasn't aware of. That guy ended up going to jail, and thank the Lord. But, you know, that's when I was starting to sneak around and talk to my children's father. He was a good friend of that guy. Well, he was a customer of that guy's. And I remember my children's father coming in, and he was the only decent one out of the group, you know, that I looked like I would ever associate with. He was a pretty boy. You know, he just looked like somebody that outside of that world that I would have been around before I got into that world, you know. So I ended up talking to him. The guy went to jail, and I never had, you know, a home. And I ended up talking to that guy. His name was Bubba. It's my boy's dad. And I moved in with him practically. I started living with him. I actually had his mom's car. He gave me his cell phone. You know, his mom took care of me, like her own daughter. And I'm in my active addiction now. Okay, I'm doing meth daily. You know, whatever I could get, I would do. If we didn't have meth, we were doing crack. I didn't like it very much, and cocaine, I never did it again. After that night that happened to me, I never did it again after that night. I'm the girl that the lady walked up to at the ball game and told me to stop recording my son. She told me not to record my son at the ball game, and I wasn't bothering anybody. You know, and I don't have nothing against this woman, but this woman has made my life a living hell. I'm telling you, I've been through more in my life than most men and most women together. But I know God, I know there's a better purpose, and that's the only thing that's kept me going through all these years, is I know God has got something so big for me. But I also have an addiction to a person, you know, and that I'm trying to fight right now. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know. This is a healing process, isn't it?
I think it is.
So I remember watching my mama take her first drink of alcohol. That man had us in church. That man had us in church every Wednesday and every Sunday. And my mama left him, or when we left him and we moved into those duplexes, I remember my mama walking next door to a party, and I knew. I knew. I walked outside and I seen her with a drink in her hand, and I knew it was bad. So I didn't go to church much more after that because I didn't have nobody to make me. I come home from prison, and my math teacher actually got me back in church years later. Okay, now you have to think I was 16 then. I went to prison my first time in 2012.
How
Okay,
old were
I had my
you?
baby in prison, sir.
How old were you?
I was 22. 22. Me and my children's father caught a charge together. I had a 1-year-old son. or 2-year-old son, about to be 2-year-old son. I got busted September the 1st of 2009 or 8. Okay, and I was pregnant with my second son when this happened. Both of our names was on the apartment. I would have gotten high that day, but thank the Lord we got busted. And we both got charged with everything. The charge was possession with precursors with intent to manufacture and possession of methamphetamine. He had just got done cooking dope. And I took the garbage to the dumpster, and imagine this. The only white garbage can and the only white garbage bag in the whole dumpster it was. Oh, Lord, ain't it funny how the Lord works? So we seen him sitting across the road. The guy that my baby daddy was running with had just gotten in trouble and left some things there, and they knew that my baby daddy was going to try to do it again. And, you know, people are like, well, why didn't you leave him? You were pregnant. Why didn't you just leave? You knew better. I didn't have nowhere to go. Me and my mom have never really had a great relationship, and she was in a bad place still in her life. And Bubba was the only normalcy that I knew, other than Chris Fulper. His family ate on Sundays. His mom cooked supper every night. They had food. They had power. They had water, you know? And he had actually ended up breaking up with his girlfriend. His girlfriend broke up with him. But long story short, I slept with him. I got pregnant. Just boom, that fast one time. Maybe 2 times I got pregnant. And I would sneak to the back bedroom and hide when his girlfriend would come over. I didn't want to go home. That was my home. So I was probably 3 or 4 months pregnant when he finally left her. My dad passed away, and I got a lot of money. We all got a lot of money between us kids and my stepmom and everything. I think I got $30,000, and I blew it, spent it all on drugs. A TV, took it back for drugs. A phone, took it back for drugs. You know, I wasn't aware that I had an addiction. I was still young, you know. Even when I got busted, I wasn't aware that stuff seeps through the walls and can get in your kid's system. He was about to be 1 year old, and I was pregnant with my second one. If I recall correctly, it was 1 or 2. I didn't know it seeped through walls. I wasn't aware of that. Thank God my child passed his drug test. Okay, and that's when my son was placed with my aunt. Oh golly, sir, my story is so long. Is everybody else's this long? Just now realizing how much I've been through. You're making me really see some things. I lost my son during that. They called me out of the jail, and I went to court, and I needed somebody blood to take my son. I was pregnant, 9 months pregnant. Had my baby a week later, 2 weeks later, as a matter of fact. Had my second child 2 weeks later after I got busted for what I told you we got busted for. Both of our names was on the apartment, and the backpack was there with me. Of course, we both got charged with everything there. So my aunt was there, and my mom was there in court when I went that day. I was about to pop, and not my blood aunt. It's my dad. It was my uncle's married wife, or my uncle's wife that married into our family. She had 2 adopted daughters. Easily, I knew that she would be able to do it. She's actually in active addiction now herself. She's not doing very well at all. But I forgave her. But long story short, what she did was she said she would help me with my son. And then she called DHS. So DHS, I stole him off her front porch. And she dropped him off on mine. She had a mental breakdown. She was sober. She just had a mental breakdown. So she dropped him off on my front porch, and my DHS worker called and said, Meghann, do you have your son? Keep in mind, I have a 1-week-old baby in my arms. Meghann, do you have your son? I said, yes, I do. She said, Meghann, you know you're not supposed to have him alone. I said, yes, ma'am, I do. My caseworker was pregnant. And I was like, ma'am, what would you do if somebody dropped your child off on your front porch? I don't understand. Like, I didn't have a choice. She said, Meghann, I used to bring him up here and bring all his things. So I had to take my 1-year-old, or he was 2, because they're 2 years apart, my oldest and my middle one. So he was 2. I'm sorry. I had to take my 2-year-old and my newborn child with me to drop off my baby to DHS. And he had to be placed in a foster home. I never really in my life felt love like I did until I had my son, my oldest son. I knew what love was when I had him. And then I had my second one, and now thinking back, it's just like every time I've had a child, it's been so traumatic for me. My first one's intestines was on the outside of his umbilical cord, not due to anything I did. It was called gastroschisis. So it's all kind of been a traumatic experience with every child I've had. So long story short, he went to foster care. He was there for 3 months. I passed all my drug tests and I got him right back, okay? Dad didn't do much of nothing. He was working in Memphis. And I had my newborn baby by myself. I would drive to see. They let me know where he was. They finally let me call because some parents don't call when they say they're going to. So they would let me call and check on him. I actually spent that Christmas with them and everything, but I got him right back. I had him back before Christmas. And Halloween, or they took him right around his birthday. Halloween is when all this happened. So I got busted September. October 31st is his birthday, and he was in a foster home with a family. I had him back by Halloween, so I moved pretty fast. I didn't play about my babies, and now all this time I had my newborn. And she's like, I'm like, why didn't y'all take him? She said, I could have took your new one, but did you want me to? No, I didn't want you to, but this is so hard on me. I had to drive and pick up my 2-year-old son, and he cries for me. They would let me get him every other weekend for a couple hours, so they were a good family. And they would let me come pick him up and bring him home for a few hours, and I had to take that baby and drop him off by myself, just me, him, and the newborn, and with him crying. I'm sure wondering why my mama don't want me, but she wants him, the other baby. So long story short, not long after that, their dad went to prison, and he did a year. So he come home, and tag, I met. I went right behind him. We were like oil and water. We didn't mix very well. So he come home, and I was on drug court, and I was doing very, very well. I was doing so good. And it only takes those people, man, being around those people. And he was those people. We didn't do good together. And I asked him and I begged him, please, whatever you do, don't bring no Suboxone around me, because Suboxone is what I was scared of the most. I got put on drug court. He got sent to prison. So if that tells you anything. So I got put on drug court. He got sent to prison. I lasted maybe a year on drug court, because when he come home, honey, I was on a bus straight on my way over there. And when I went, I was pregnant with my third son. So I went to prison in 2012, and I was pregnant with my third son. I was immediate transfer from the rehab again. Both times I went straight from rehab to prison. So this time I was immediate transfer because I was pregnant. So long story short, I come home on a pass. Baby daddy had Suboxone around me, and I'll tell you how crazy this is. I begged him not to bring it around me. He was on probation. I was on drug court strict. They do not play. I was doing so very good. I found some Suboxone in his truck. I got mad at him. I cussed him. I threw it as hard as I could across my front yard. I mean, I tell you, my grass was so high. My kids, you could walk around. You couldn't see my kids. It was so high. Do you hear me? It was high. And I threw that pill, and I prayed to God, and I said, God, I'm fixing to go out here. I sat down in my recliner, and I cried, and I asked God, God, I'm fixing to go look for this pill. I said, please, God, don't let me find this pill. And guess what? I walked out there. I took 2 steps down my steps, and I took a left, and there it was, laying on a brown leaf. So there you go. That started a little. Let me see if I can slide by a drug court. You can't get anything past those people. They ended up doing a home visit. Of course, I failed. I was pregnant with my third son. They did not like that at all. They put me in rehab, and in rehab, I come home on a pass. I had a week left. I come home on a pass, and my baby daddy was on Suboxone, and I wanted a piece. I was on a strip. And I'm like, please, I begged him. I remember that whole time that I was out on that pass, my 2 babies were in the backseat of my car. And I remember the whole time all I wanted to do was find a Suboxone strip, because all I had was a little piece. Woo-wee, I tell you what, you're bringing back some memories. So I ended up going to rehab. Yeah, and from rehab, I failed that drug test, because everybody in there failed the drug test. They popped on us. Everybody was going hard in there. That was around the time bath salt come out. So I ended up being immediate transfer. They come pick me up from rehab, took me straight to the county jail. The next morning, I was in the prison. I was 7 months pregnant. Okay, and I did a year. I was ordered to A&D, so I had to stay at least a year, because A&D is 9 months. I come home right before my baby's first birthday. But while I had him in prison, I got to spend 2 or 3 days with him. Nobody was there with me to hold my hand. Nobody was there for me to talk to. It was a very, very hard thing for me to do. They threw me back in prison with busted stitches, and the doctors are all on house arrest bracelets, and they thought they lost an instrument inside of me. As a matter of fact, I had to do about 8 X-rays before they found the instrument. But you know what? When I went to prison that time and I had my baby, I never seen him again till I come home, because it was like 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive. It was too hard on my family. They did let my family come get him. But you know what? You know what I did that year in prison? I stayed in my Bible. I didn't have commissary. I didn't make a lot of phone calls. My children's father was at home with my boys. My mama was raising my baby that I just had, and I didn't have much in there. But all I had was my Bible and God. And that time was so easy. It was the easiest time ever. I come home, and that's when I started working at my church. And I got very big into my church, as a matter of fact. I had my kids in church, and I was doing the best I've ever done in my life. And I was so happy. I lived in a broke down trailer that my whole family's lived in, and there was a hole in the bathtub. And I'll tell you this, I was in church, and I didn't have no worries. I loved myself, and I knew God had everything under control. When I tell you, I know I can be that woman again, and I know I will be her. I will be there again. But I think back to how happy I was, and I didn't have nothing. Hardly. I had a broke down trailer. I'd have to put the kids in a baby bathtub and give them a shower, because the shower had a big old hole in it. And it had such a hole in it. When I would give my children a bath, people would stop. Hey, you've got a really bad water leak. I'm like, no, I'm just giving the kids a bath. Have a great night. Have a great day. And, but I was happy. So when I come home from prison, I found out that my baby daddy was doing a lot of things, and I made him leave. Okay, he was sleeping with my neighbor. I had a relationship going on with her. I found the phone with messages between him and his first cousin. You heard it right, his first cousin. I'm telling it all, sir. I'm just going to tell you everything, okay? Him and his first cousin had relations. And he had to go. And I had to call, bless his heart, he's passed now, but it was his stepdaddy that raised him. And I had to let him see these messages to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. And he was like, no, you're right, Meghann, you're right. I don't know what that was or what they had going on. All I know is it wasn't what it was supposed to be, and it should have never happened, and those messages didn't make much sense to me, okay? So he had to go. All right, I met my little girl's daddy not long after that, and everything was good in the beginning. I was on house arrest, did very well on it. When I come home from prison, I got on Suboxone, Subutex, and it did me well. I did very well for a couple of years. 4 years I was in my church, and I was doing very well. And I don't remember what happened, and I relapsed again on meth. And that's when everything really, really went downhill really bad. Me and my fiance, my little girl's dad, my ex-fiance, me and him, everything was great when I first met him. Then we moved in together, and it's like the mask fell off. And keep in mind, I was with my first children's father for 8 years, and I was with my little girl's dad almost 8 years. So my whole life I've been in a relationship. This man had a girlfriend as well when I met him. So me and her dad got together, and he was so good to my boys. God, he was so good to my boys. Lord, I'm sorry for saying your name in vain. But this man was great to my kids. And a man that was like my daddy, like a daddy to me, that lived right up the road from me, ended up telling me he had a girlfriend that he'd been with for 4 years, just like the one before. And I'm like, no, you're lying. You're not telling me the truth. No, he had a girlfriend that he'd been with for 4 years. And sure enough, long story short, I love myself. I made him leave. He come over, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's where you've been. I thought you were seeing your daughter. He had a daughter his mom was raising. And I made him leave, and I loved myself enough to make him leave, and I didn't care. And I know I'm going to get there again one day soon. I know I will. But long story short, I ended up letting him come back. We got engaged. And this was all in like a year time frame. We moved really, really fast. I was only broke up with my little boy's dad 3 months maybe when I met this man. But this man was good to my boys. And when I say good to my boys, I mean he was the father my boys never had. Their dad was caught up in his own addiction, and he never really was a dad, And so what's crazy is in 2016, I knew I was going to prison. I cried the whole way to jail. 2 weeks later, I was clean and sober, but my mind still wasn't right all the way. But 2 weeks later, they come and picked me up and took me to jail. Because that last drug test they gave me, they told me if my levels changed, I was going to prison. And whatever the purpose may be, those levels had changed. And I promise you, I ain't got no problem admitting when I'm wrong. But I'm telling you, I didn't do no benzos. I fought, and I wanted to see the envelope they wouldn't show me. That right there is when my whole life changed. I was in the county jail, and my little girl's dad was raising my boys, and I talked him in to bringing me a pack to the jail. And that's when he caught his contraband charge, and I caught my contraband charge. And I knew then that I was in lots of trouble. Not only was I going to prison, I'm going to prison with a new charge. My little boy's dad was also in prison. Little to my knowledge, he was working against me behind my back. While I'm calling the jail or the prison every day trying to get him moved because he owes people for drugs and they're wanting to beat him up. Little to my knowledge, he's working with his first cousin trying to take my boys from me. He was in the county jail. I figured out it was for that pack, and here's DHS. Meghann, you got 24 hours to find somebody blood to get your kids. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. This was in 2016. I panicked and I didn't know what to do. I went back to my cell and I cried. And I knew that my mama couldn't handle all three of them, and I knew I didn't want them separated, but I wasn't listening because I was so overwhelmed. But the DHS worker was trying to tell me, Meghann, just let your mom get them. She was trying to tell me, let your mom get them, and Clay can get them back, just let your mom get them for the system. And then, she was trying to tell me that, but I wasn't listening. So that's when I read temporary custody papers is what I read the next day. This woman and her mom showed up, which would be my baby daddy's first cousin. They showed up with these papers, and what I read for temporary custody, but what I signed was physical primary custody. This woman told me she would help me until I got home, got on my feet. She'd give me my kids back. That was almost 9 years ago, and I'm still fighting. I did 2.5 years in prison, and I come home. And when I come home, I did good for a little while. 6 months later, I went back to prison. Little to my knowledge, my little girl's dad was still willing and dealing a little bit, and then I relapsed again. I wasn't in my addiction very long before I went right back to prison. Right when I had, fell off the wagon, I went right back to prison. I was there for 6 months and I come home. I come home from prison and I'm on Suboxone, and it keeps me normal. Have I had some slip ups? Absolutely. Am I perfect? No, I'm not. Am I growing and doing better? I absolutely am. I've had to really be in an isolation stage. And that's what I've been in the last 3 or 4 years, actually, but for sure these last 2 years. I've been single for the last 4 years. And, it's been hard, but I'm proud of who I am right now. And I know I've got a long way to go. I know I do. And it's hard having my daughter and not having my boys. I carry a lot of guilt. But I recently just tried to start staying in my Bible more and getting my interest from God, not from other people. Because I'm bad to look for. I look for my validation in other people. Because I feel like sometimes I'm not worthy of forgiveness. But I can't sit here and bicker and be bitter about it. Me and my mom's relationship is horrible. Not horrible, but it's bad, we talk to each other awful. And I don't want my daughter to be like that. That's why I never wanted a daughter, because I knew how my mom's relationship was. My boys, they're not allowed to talk to me or see me or approach me at ball games. And me having to learn and figure that out and see how to codependent upon my relationship with my children has really been a learning experience. So all I can do is educate myself on parental alienation. Right now, I got a new job. It took me 8 months of sitting here by myself before I was able to get another job. I knew when the time was right, God would bless me, and He did. Still today, every day I wake up and it's a battle, but I'm happy. I'm happy. I think the most misunderstood thing is people, I don't judge people, and people choose to judge me, but I don't know why I do what I do. And that is a really good question. I haven't really thought about that. The most misunderstood thing about me. Who I am, period. And that my circumstances didn't play the biggest part on me being who I am, but I think your childhood and how you was raised has a big impact on your future and who you are. And I think people have a hard time accepting that and understanding that. I don't blame it on my childhood, but I wish I would have been led a different direction or gave different options. I only knew one road, and that was the bad road, the wild road. I didn't never know another path. My most important thing that I've learned is I've got to stop trying to run my own life, because it doesn't matter how hard I try. I'm never going to get my own life right. It's not my life. It's never going to be my life. It's God's. and until I'm able to fully accept that I can try it over and over and over, but I'm not going to get it right until I let God do it himself and stop trying to run things. Psalms 23, verse 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. Verse 23 and 3 says, He restoreth my soul.
He restores my soul.
Yes, sir.
And God kept saying that to me. He restores my soul. And when I was 33-years old, the Lord took me to that scripture and he said, I restore your soul. You have to first, once been restored, you have to have once known him at one time in order for you to be restored.
And I did. So I can be restored.
You can be restored.